Hello friends. Welcome to the Fiction Quest. How are you all? So in this video, we will see what if Luffy the Primodial pirate fell in love with Nami. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now without wasting any more time, let's begin the story. X. Robin was remembering her past. All the pain and suffering she went through. She knew that was over now. All her darkness has been replaced by light. She felt she belonged in the world. She was at harmony with her new family. She smiled at this thought, a place where she finally belongs. Although she cared for all her nakamas, one person stood out the most, Monkey D. Luffy. To her, Luffy was what her childhood friend Saul told her about, a true nakama to sail the sea with. He was someone who would protect her and give her a place to live freely. She wanted to get to know him better. Honestly, any time she could spend with him would be blissful for her. It did not bother her that Luffy was in Baka, eating like a monster, being extremely optimistic about everything, and being incapable of reading. She liked him for him. He was special to her. She knew she loved him but was unsure if he loved her. This made her afraid. She knew that she was beautiful. Sanji would always look at her in awe. Sanji's standards were very high for beautiful women. How she would wish for Luffy to stare at her like that. By her observations, she knew that Luffy never looked at women with hearts in his eyes and never got nervous around women either. She knew that in order to figure out if Luffy loved or at least liked her would be a hard task. So with that in mind, she decided to ask the one person on the ship closest to Luffy. His first mate Zoro. Zoro, although very similar to Luffy in thinking, is quite mature at times. She hopes he will have an understanding in all of this. As she builds up courage, she starts to climb the Thousand Sunnies ladder to get to the where Zoro spends most of his day. As she gains view of Zoro, she begins to laugh a bit, seeing that Zoro is sleeping while lifting weights. This reminds her of when Luffy slept and ate, his infamous technique. They're definitely one and the same. Her first mission was to wake up Zoro, which would not be an easy task since he sleeps heavily while on the ship. She started with a whisper, Zoro-san, Zoro-san. Then she called his name a little louder but there was no response. Annoyed, she then gave him a slap in the face. Droplets of sweat began to flow from her pretty face. She could not believe 4 attempts of this did not work. Annoyed now, she went to her last resort. All you could hear was dos fleur, a grab and a muffled, oh wow 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 wow, from Zoro. He looks at her with his devilish face and his white death eyes. She just smiles and says, now that I have your attention I would like to discuss something important with you, and if you do not mind keep it down. Zoro replies with his typical, She takes that as a yes and pauses for a moment. Well, you see Zoro, it seems you know Luffy the best since you were first to join and you were his first mate. I was wondering if you knew he was interested in women. A smirk grew across Zoro's face as he looks at Robin. Yawning, he replies, and why might you be wondering? Figuring out a way to get him to answer without knowing it was her would be easy, she thought. I was just curious because it seems that only you and Luffy have no interest in women, so I came to believe you guys had a thing for each other. Zoro, a little annoyed at the smile on her face, had a vein popping out of his forehead. I understand now. You are asking this for Nami. I always knew her and Luffy would be together. Numerous droplets of sweat emerge on her face, a slight sadness grew in her eyes, and a frown emerged. Zoro burst into laughter and tears while rolling around on the floor. As soon as he stopped laughing, he yells. Baka! Don't you think I know you are asking for yourself? I see it every time you read a book. You always try to sneak a peek at him. You're lucky only I can see it. Arrow Cook and Nami are always busy flirting while Frankie works on his projects. Luffy, Usopp Brook, and Chopper are always playing silly games and I'm always here watching everything. Baka. Surprised at how insightful Zoro is, though she grew tense, she remained calm and put on a calm demeanor. She looked at Zoro directly into his eyes and asked, are you sure no one else knows about this? Zoro was in a tough spot. The deadly stare has a fierce aura. It seemed like she was saying, you lie to me and death awaits. Zoro has been through plenty of battles with fierce opponents, but he knew one thing. A furious woman was deadlier than any pirate at the Grand Line. He simply says, hi hi, followed by a head nod. Confident with that answer, Robin grew less tense. Her face began to clear up and a smile formed once again. A moment of silence grew between them, so Zoro spoke up. How in the world can you, Nico Robin, a beautiful 28-year-old archaeologist, like that baka Luffy? Avoiding one question with another, she responds, do you think Luffy would be interested in me? Picturing the image of Robin and Luffy, he let out an evil chuckle. Luffy is not as dumb as he seems. You will never know until you try. Make sure to be as straightforward as possible. You should definitely bring a piece of meat with you. With his advice, she gained the much-needed confidence in herself. Robin and Zoro friendship grew. She stands up and heads to the exit. Quickly, she says in a serious tone, oh, by the way Zoro, if you tell anyone about this, I will make sure that next time they will be no more. Thank you. Hurriedly, she walks out with a smile. An annoyed Zoro whispers, one day I'll kill her. With her newfound confidence she goes in search for Luffy. The first place she looks is the kitchen. As she opens the door, she sees Luffy sitting down alone with plates of food. A tingle rushes down her spine. Luffy yells, Oi, Robin, come eat with me. Sanji left to go give something to Nami. Smiling, she proceeds to sit next to Luffy. She lost her confidence. She stares Luffy in the face and blurts out. Say Luffy, I was wondering if you were ever interested in women. Luffy with a full mouth of food smiles and says, WSHAST diums a dayan? She giggles while fully understanding what he said. With a more firm voice, she says. Have you ever been curious about women before Luffy? Luffy gulps his food and says, I don't understand. Remembering Zoro's warning of being straightforward, she tries to figure out a way to symbolize what she is talking about. A bright idea pops in her head. She grabs a piece of meat from his plate, startling Luffy. While swinging it side to side, she says, Luffy, you know how when you see meat you always get excited. Do you get that same excitement when you see a woman? Luffy looks at her, then looks at the meat, and goes back and forth figuring out which one to choose. At the last second he grabs the meat from her and shoves it into his mouth. I might get excited, but that's a secret. She. He looks Robin in the eye with a big grin. She knew he was interested. She had a feeling that Luffy was interested in her, but she was not 100% positive. Following Zoro's advice, she went with her impulse and tried to seal the deal. Before Luffy could grab the last piece of meat and put it into his mouth, Robin placed her face right next to his. She closed her eyes and gave him a kiss. She became hot and she grew an unusual red glow to her face. Luffy, on the other hand, stood there with eyes wide open, not because he did not enjoy it but his attention was elsewhere. Sanji walked into the kitchen the moment they kissed. He stared at Luffy. Luffy, in return, gave Sanji his trademark smirk and peace sign. Seeing this, Sanji burst into flames ready to attack. Luffy closed his eyes and returned the kiss, making Robin release of pleasure. Hearing his fire was extinguished and tears began to flow. He banged the floor while screaming. Why is it always him and not me? There was a sad aura around Sanji similar to when he had first seen his beautiful bounty poster. Luffy had the biggest smirk on his face. Robin was happier than ever. She thought that things would be more interesting between Luffy and her from now on. The night was quiet and peaceful. The sea was calm. It was as if they were not on the Grand Line at all. Everyone was famished from their dinners and had retired into their quarters, and unfortunately for Luffy it was his turn on watch. He always hated being on watch. To him it was boring, there was no excitement involved in watching, but this night was different. This night gave him opportunity to think about the events that occurred hours ago with Robin and himself. Throughout his whole life he has never given thought to women. He never was like Sanji, admiring every woman in his presence. He was too focused in his dreams and ambitions to even give that a thought, and yet he could not help but think about Robin and the moment they shared just hours ago. Why did Robin give me a kiss yesterday? Why did I even return the kiss? What is this feeling I have in my chest? Why does my chest get so warm when I think about her? It's a mystery feeling. This is too much thinking. Why don't I go ask Robin? Yash, I've decided I am going to ask Robin. He begins the adventure which he labeled the Mystery Feeling Saga. Being extremely quiet not to wake up anyone on deck, he slowly advances to Robin's room. As he reaches her room, He looks through the small circular window to see if she's awake. Much to his disappointment, she is sound asleep. He contemplates if he should wake Robin up, and at the last second he decides to go into the is extremely careful not to make any loud sounds. He did not want to startle Robin from her sleep. As he creeps closer to Robin's bed, he is stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes are focused in on Robin's sleeping figure. Her hair is extremely messy, a big smile on her beautiful face, both her delicate hands clenching her chest. He thinks to himself, Robin must be having a really good dream right now. He stays silent for a moment, taking in the beautiful image of Robin. He has never noticed how Robin looked until now. Staring at her lying form makes his chest warm up. No wonder Sanji always goes nuts when he sees her. Realizing that he has spoken aloud, he quickly covers his mouth with his hands, his eyes still locked onto Robin's figure. Robin's eyes slowly began to open as she began to focus in on a male figure with bulging eyes, 2 hands covering his mouth and a straw hat. Luffy, is that you? Asks Robin, still half asleep from her peaceful slumber. He takes his hands off his mouth, closes his eyes in embarrassment. Hi, he replies so quietly, which was unusual for him. Robin quickly sits up and opens her eyes, stares at Luffy and smiles. How long have you been standing there, Luffy? Robin says, rubbing her eyes, shaking off her sleepiness. I was only here for a minute, Robin, I swear, exclaimed Luffy. Robin smiles at Luffy, noticing a small fear in her captain. And what are you doing here, Captain? Asked Robin with a hint of curiosity in her voice. I came here to ask you something, but when I came in you were sleeping, and Luffy blurted out quickly. Luffy was always confident, without a worry in the world, but for some reason he had a mysterious feeling in the pit of his stomach. And what, Luffy? She asked, more eager to know what Luffy wanted. This was the first time he has ever gave her a visit at night time. Although unusual, she was glad she woke up to him. I never noticed how beautiful you were, Robin, he said, turning away from her stare, growing a tint of red on his face. Robin's eyes shot open at his statement, her heart began to beat quicker, her body began to grow warmer, and a tint of red grew on her face. She was lost in thought, his words repeating in her head. How she waited for him to say that. Did he just say I was beautiful? It sounds so much different from Sanji saying it to me. Sanji tells me that every day, so it's a routine for him, but for Luffy to say that. I have never heard him say beautiful to a woman ever, and yet he says it to me with so much feeling. Robin, are you okay? Said a worried Luffy. Robin snaps out of her thoughts and looks at Luffy. Yes, I'm fine, Luffy, was her slow but quick response. She was still taken aback by Luffy's remark. That's great, Robin, I thought you were sick or something. Mind if I sit down? Says Luffy, still looking away from Robin's glare. That not a problem, she replies to him with a hint of excitement in her voice. She patted a space on her bed next to her, and Luffy gladly accepted the invitation. Oi, Robin, he said. Yes, Luffy, she said. Well, I was thinking about yesterday, and why you kissed me. I don't understand why you kissed me, I never done anything for that, Luffy said as his stomach began to feel more different to him. There was an eerie silence in the room. Robin was lost in her thoughts. She did not know how much time has been passing by. Never done anything for me? You done more than you can impossibly imagine, Luffy. If I only had the strength to tell you everything right now I would, but I'm scared to spill my heart out to you. Oh, it's okay, Robin, you don't have to tell me. I'll leave now, sorry for waking you up, Luffy says quickly, hoping that Robin would give him a response. Luffy looks at Robin. It seems like she was in pain, her eyes were watery. Luffy feels a pain in his chest, a pain different from the one before, as if something was ran through his heart. Thinking he has done something terribly wrong, he gets up quietly from the beds and makes his way to the exit of the room, slowly begins to close the door. Chato Mat, Luffy, please come back, she says rapidly, not wanting Luffy to leave her right now. Luffy turns around to see Robin staring at him, her blue-orbed eyes pleading for him to come back to sit next to her. He slowly advances towards Robin and sits a little farther away from her as if he is scared to hurt Robin. They both begin to talk and immediately stop to let one another speak, then minutes pass by without any word. Luffy, feeling the pain in his chest again, decides he should talk first. Robin, when I eat meat I always have this warm feeling in my stomach and it feels good, but ever since you kissed me I have gotten the same feeling but in my chest. It's confusing me. I don't know why I kissed you back, but it felt good to kiss you. I never have kissed a girl in my life, but for some reason I want to kiss you again and I don't know why. I wanted to ask you why you kissed me so maybe I can understand this mystery feeling I have.
So he does have feelings for me. That baka he does not know what it means though. I guess if I tell him what's in my heart he would understand. There should be no harm in expressing all my feelings right now to him, after all he is thinking about me.
Luffy, the reason why I kissed you is because I love you, Luffy, I really do. You have done so much for me yet you do not want anything in return. You are the first person who has showed me kindness and I can't ever repay that. You were the only one to convince me that even if the world wanted me to die I should live and you would protect me, and you showed me you would. She from the deepest parts of her heart, as if she has completely lost all the burdens that has been on her for years. Luffy sat there with a look on his face, a look in which he was taking everything inside his mind and processing everything she just said. His expression changed from confused to a wide grin. That was nothing, Robin, that how a captain should be, he said confidently. Not all captains are like that, you are special, Luffy, she said, tears forming in her eyes.
Ah, I was taught by the best it seems. Shishishi. Hey Robin, what is the love you speak of? Is it the same love for the sea or meat, or One Piece? Luffy asked, peculiarly amazed at the word love.
It is very similar to that, Luffy, but love for a person is a little different. It's emotions you have for a person. It can make you happy when you are around that person, and sad when they are not next to you. It's hard to describe love because everyone experiences it different, but once you feel it you would know. Robin replies with much emotion and passion in her voice. She was being true to her feelings and thoughts.
Luffy sat there idly thinking about what she just said. He was processing everything in his one-track brain and finally came to a conclusion.
So it's a mystery then, he said. You can say that, Luffy. Why do I get a warm feeling in my chest when I think about you then? When I think of Nami I never get a warm feeling, I always see her punching me or yelling at me for something. It's scary. Asked a perplexed Luffy, hoping that Robin can help him solve his mystery feeling. Robin, hearing what he said, sent tingles down her spines. Her heart fluttered at his statement. He feels warm in his chest when he thinks about me. This means he loves me, it must be it. If he thinks of Nami and he gets scared, that must mean. Before she could finish her thoughts she catches a statement with her ears. Robin, it no mystery now. I think I love you, said a quiet Luffy. Robin froze in shock. She did not know if Luffy actually said that or she was dreaming it. Luffy, what did you say? She asked with a hint of fear in her voice. She was hoping that she did not mistake what he had just implied. I love you, Robin, replies the self-assured Luffy with the biggest grin on his face, like as if he just came to a realization of all his feelings. Robin begins to cry tears of joy. She has a big smile on her face, a smile that could light up the night sky. She lunges at Luffy and begins to kiss him. She takes in everything she can from him, his scent, his taste, his expression.
Luffy's eyes grew. He soon returned the kiss. Even though Luffy was not experienced, it did not stop him from roaming her mouth. They began to explore one another's mouth, finding every spot available, their tongues wrapping around each other as if they were meant to be one. Robin kept kissing Luffy with her passion, but he could not take it anymore. He broke the kiss, and started to gasp for air. What was thought for? Luffy said, the breathless captain.
For making me love you more, Robin says, her face glowing red from both excitement and emotions.
And I get that. It'll make you love me all the time, Luffy said in excitement. He enjoyed that kiss greatly now that he knew the mystery feeling was love.
They sat in silence, but this time in a warm silence. No one needed to talk. They were both looking at each other deeply in the eyes as if they were searching for a view of one another's soul. Luffy notices that a spark of light emerged from Robin's beautiful blue orbs. Say, Luffy, does this mean that we are together now? She says timidly. What do you mean? Luffy replies, confused about her statement. Together like boyfriend and girlfriend, she says, more advancing. I don't understand, he says, still confused about it.
Luffy, together like a bone and a meat. You are the bone and I am the meat. We are together and stay together, she says, giggling at the though. Although it sounds weird for her to put it in that way, she knew that Luffy understand anything if you symbolize it with food. Luffy has a look on his face as if he has finally came to the realization of her declaration.
Why didn't you say that, Robin? Of course, he says, grinning at the image in his mind of a big piece of meat and a beautiful bone. He knew that if Robin was the meat, it would be the best piece of meat in the world. She leaned into Luffy as if she was going to kiss him, but instead moves to his ear and whispers a sniffled. "Thank you, Luffy, and if you ever try to find another piece of meat you will regret it."
Luffy moved back for a second. Usually Robin was never the person that could panic him. What she said just now scared the shit out of Luffy. He knew she meant it, and he did not want to see the angry side of first-hand experiences Nami angry on a daily basis, so he knows it can be bad, but for someone who is so calm to have an angry side it must be hell itself.
"Hi Robin. You will be my only meat unless I'm hungry for food and not you she. He said, a slight hint of nervousness in his words. Luffy has never been good with words, but even so they never ceased to make Robin melt. Every word touched her in a positive way. Robin, exhausted from all her emotions inside and outside, decides it's a good time for her to go back to sleep. She begins to lie in bed, motioning Luffy to come to bed with her. "I can't Robin, I'm on watch duty today. Everyone would kill me," he says, wishing that he could stay with Robin in her bed.
Sadness grew in Robin's eyes. She knew he had responsibilities, but still she wanted him near her right now. Everything else didn't matter. Luffy walks up to Robin, plants a kiss on her forehead, and put his most treasured possession on her head. "You can sleep with this tonight, it's my treasure, and now you are my greatest treasure." He tucks her into bed, and begins to head out. He takes one more look at both of his treasures and gives his trademark grin. He closes the door and darkness envelopes the room once again. Arigato Luffy, as sleep takes over the archaeologists. Outside, Luffy looks into the sky. He is in high spirits knowing his new emotions for Robin were true. Arigato Robin, as he advances to his special seat waiting for the sun to rise to a beautiful morning. Morning comes and everyone makes their way to the kitchen as if everything was a normal day. Usual Sanji has manifested an elegant 5-star breakfast. The crew begins to enter the kitchen and one by one they begins to do his trademark dancing around Nami with big hearts in his eyes as he sets down her food. Zoro walks in yawning like usual, looks at Sanji and trades their rude remarks to one another until Nami makes them both quiet down. She looks at all of them with a great big smile, which put everyone into shock. Robin was never the morning person. She usually did not greet everyone, let alone put on a smile for everyone to show. "Today is a beautiful day, is it not, Nami-chan?" Robin says with a great happiness in her soft voice. Nami was taken aback by Robin. She did not understand why she was so happy. It seems as if Robin has an aura around her, an impression of being reborn. "Yay, it's a nice day today. Hey Robin-san, why are you so happy? Why are you wearing Luffy's straw hat?" Nami says, confused about her best friend's energetic energy. Although she was happy that Robin was happy, it crossed her mind that something must have happened to her. "No reason." Robin quickly an implement of joy in her words. She looks at Nami in her eyes and gives her a playful wink. Robin sits down in her seat, making sure there is another seat saved for her special captain. She begins to wonder where her Luffy is. He is usually the first person to be here for the meals. "Zoro-san, do you know where Luffy is?" Robin said, eager to see her captain in the morning. Zoro looks up at Robin and notices that she is in an extremely good mood. The flashback of her yesterday still haunts him. That simple yet terrifying experience he had with her yesterday was enough to be cemented in his memories. Before he could answer, the long-awaited captain burst into the kitchen. Luffy scans the room searching for a certain person, and as their eyes meet his ear-to-ear grin appears. He walks towards Robin, still grinning. "Ah, my hat. Can I get it back, Robin?" "You can most certainly get your hat back, Luffy, but first, aren't you forgetting something?" Luffy, puzzled by her question, he looks down to see what he is wearing and notices that he is fully clothed. He begins to scan his memory if he has forgotten to do anything before coming to breakfast, and the light pops into his head again. "Ah, sorry, how could I forget to give you this, Robin," he says as his face moves closer to Robin. He plants a quick pleasant on her lips and sits down. Robin blushes a little and takes the straffut from her head and put it on the captain. She gives him a quick kiss back, not realizing that everyone is watching them. In unison everyone yells, "What the was that?" eager to get a response. Everyone was left wondering what the hell happened between those two yesterday. They remembered everything was perfectly normal. Luffy taking this opportunity to start eating as much as he can, leaving the spotlight on Robin. She looks at everyone with his smile still intact. "Oh, it's nothing, me and Luffy are dating now."
Zoro was the first to react to this. He wanted to make sure he rubs it in Sanji's face before anyone else could.
Oi shitty cook, did you hear that? Luffy has a girlfriend now, where are you at?
Sanji, clearing his rival's remark, burst into flames.
You shitty Marimo, you want a piece of me, and he lunges forward, but to his demise he meets the end of Nami's fist. As it quiets down again and everyone is settled, they pass their congratulations to Robin and Luffy.
Oni-sama, you are so lucky. I wish someone would kiss me already instead of sculpting his body all day. Zoro spits all the water out from his mouth, falling back into the chair. He was not expecting that from Nami. Well, at least not right at that moment. Nami, satisfied with Zoro's reaction, begins to talk to her best friend once again. So Robin Nay-san, have you and Luffy made love yet? Before she could speak, Luffy, still with his mouth stuffed, says, YYYYESSSWWWEMAADDE Sumi Byagaluvi LAASSSTTT Negat. Robin blushed as his words reached her ears. She knew he did not know what he was talking about, but it still sounded amazing. The rest of the crew were getting mental images of Luffy and Robin having sex. My Robin Schwan naked with that lucky-ass rubber bastard. She must be like an angel when she is naked, dark skin, beautiful robust chest, long legs. I wonder if she shaves down. Robin and Straw Hat having sex on my super ship. Robin must look great naked. I bet if she was dancing and then did the super pose. Robin naked, I never thought about that. Kaya naked, I bet that is nice, but what if Kaya and Robin were naked in the same B? Come to think of it, Luffy just learned a new technique where he can make things bigger. I wonder if he could make his member bigger. Gomu Gomu no gigantic. Sanji, Frankie, Usopp noses started to burst of crimson blood, flying back and retiring to the floor. Zoro's eyes widen at his image began to display vividly. He began to think more in depth about Luffy and Robin. A grin was casted on his face. Trickles of blood came down his nose. He almost reached full perverted climax. That's until Nami stepped to the side of him and gave him the love punch of his life, sending him flying out the door to the grass deck. Nami and Chopper were the only people in the crew left standing. Chopper, although a male, was too young to understand why everyone was getting their nosebleeds. He wanted to ask Nami why everyone was on the floor, but after the punishment Nami gave Zoro, he thought it was best to keep his mouth shut.
Nami turns her attention to Robin. She gazes into her blue orbs, searching for a hint if Luffy's words were true. Robin notices Nami eye contact and snaps out of her daze. She then recollects what has just happened in the mere minutes everyone has been in the kitchen. What Luffy was trying to say, Nami, is that we were discussing why we love each other. We were not in the act of making love. Robin spoke with a calm voice as if trying to convince Nami. Nami once again gazes into Robin blue orbs, searching for a clue to if it was a lie. Ecstatic that she realizes that was the truth, she sighs in relief. Luffy was watching everything that has transpired. A mystery has just occurred, he thought. He continuities to eat since he knew this might be the only meal of the day, since Sanji might be angry at him. He clears the whole table, making sure there is not a single scrap left. Satisfied with his stomach, he turns to Robin. Oi Robin, I don't get it, if that not making love, what is? Robin turns to Luffy, searching for the words so he could understand. She knew that Luffy was able to understand everything, if it was symbolic to something he loved. Finally she has came up with a simple answer for her lover. She leans in towards his ear to give him a whisper. Luffy, I'll show you what making love is tonight. I promise you it will be more exciting than a 10-course meal. A seductive tone was in her voice. Luffy's eyes grew wider. A big grin was plastered on his face as he took in the words. He knew that nothing could be more exciting than a 10-course meal, but the way Robin had said it made it sound so promising. He was looking forward to tonight. Excitement coursed through his veins. Yes, an adventure with Robin tonight, yelled Luffy. So much for keeping it a select, Luffy, Robin says, signing in defeat. Everyone awakes from their peaceful slumber. Their massive loss of blood seemed to have no effect on the pirates. They began to make converse between one another, once again giving congratulations to Luffy and Robin, which they accepted with grace. Nami, get your ass out here, yells a furious Zoro. Nami's ears picked up these words, his eyes widen in shock. She began to sweat, fear grew in her eyes. Damn, I messed up with Zoro this time. The afternoon was such bliss for the crew today. The sky was at its purest blue. The sun shone brightly,
The sea was calm and there has not been a single attack on the Straw Hats. The pirates were going about the everyday routines. Sanji was in his private sanctuary dubbed the Love Kitchen. He was preparing lunch for the whole crew, chopping up various fishes and meat and vegetables.
He wanted to make this lunch an exquisite experience, so he could redeem himself of his shame. Having perverted thoughts in front of two beautiful ladies was unacceptable.
Robin is already taken by that shitty rubber bastard, at least I have a chance with Nami, Sanji thought to himself. Below the ship Frankie, Chopper, and Usopp were trading ideas with one another. They wanted to give a gift to Robin and Luffy as a congratulations present. They were glad that Robin has found happiness after being alone and lonely for so long.
They could not help but feel envious of her though, having Luffy attention most of the day. I hope Luffy doesn't forget about us, we usually play games at this time, Chopper says as he stares at Usopp. Chopper has always looked up to Luffy as a big brother. Luffy was the one person who could always cheer him up at any given moment. I think I will have the all cry until he plays with this disease, Usopp says as he moves both of his thumbs in a circular motion. Usopp knew that Luffy would never forget or ignore them, but he could not help missing that guy. He always brought the fun anywhere he went.
Everything will be fine guys, just let the two Lord Birds have their fun right now, then everything will be super. Frankie says as he gets ready for his signature pose. Frankie being older than the two knew what Luffy and Robin were going through. He respected that they both liked each other and supported them. Upstairs in the navigation room resided Nami and Zoro. Nami was drawing one of her many maps, coming oh so closer to her dream. She was not fully focused on her maps today because a certain green-hair swordman was in the same room with her. Zoro sat next to Nami fidgeting with his 3 katanas. I can't believe Luffy actually like Robin, it's amazing that he thinks about girls, Nami says looking at Zoro. Nami has always respected Luffy as a captain although he is an idiot sometimes she always held him high. She knew that Luffy would take care of Robin no matter what. Luffy is not as stupid as he seems, of course he is interested in women just like I am, Zoro says as he gives a wink to Nami. Zoro has a lot of respect for Luffy, as a captain and a friend. He was happy that Luffy gets his chance at happiness and his is not too far behind. On the deck there were 2 figures lying in the grass. Luffy was lying down, his arms stretched out in the grass with Robin resting her head on his chest. The couple both lost in their own world, enjoying each other's company. Both were gazing into the sky, admiring its beauty.
The sky is so beautiful today, isn't it, Luffy? Robin says, as she turns her head to meet his captain's face.
Not as beautiful as you, Robin, Luffy says with a grin on his face. Robin could never get used to Luffy complimenting her. It always made her heart flutter. Her blue orbs lock onto his brown orbs and their lips lock for a second.
As she pulls back, her eyes land on his trademark scar under his eye. She brings her soft, delicate hands toward his face, rubbing his scar.
Where did you get this scar from, Luffy? Robin asks in curiosity. There was still so much she did not know about Luffy. He has never talked about his past to her or anyone in the crew.
When I was a kid, Shanks never took me seriously, so I got on his ship one day and cut myself showing him I was tough. You should have seen his reaction, he was going crazy, he says in a joyous tone.
Luffy always loved to tell stories about his role model. A grin forms on his face at the memory of Shanks. Robin had a warm smile on her face, happy that she is learning more about Luffy, helping her get closer to him.
Shanks has done a lot for you, I take it, Luffy, Robin says softly. She did not know Shanks personally, but the way Luffy talk about him makes her certain he's an important figure in Luffy life. Yeah, he saved my life once, and because of me he lost an arm, Luffy says, a hint of regret in his voice. After that I realized he was a great pirate, and I promised him that I'll gather a crew and become the Pirate King. Luffy grins knowing that he is one step closer to meeting Shanks in the New World.
He must be a great man, Luffy, Robin says in a sweet voice.
He is, Robin. I need to thank him when I see him, Luffy says as he swallowed his throat, suppressing his tears.
Thank him for what, Luffy? The raven-haired woman asks in curiosity. If he didn't push me to become a pirate, I would have never met you, he says in a calm, sweet voice. As word reaches the young woman's ears, she begins to melt. Her heart began to thump faster, her body temperature rising, and tears grew in her eyes. Luffy never ceased to amaze the beautiful archaeologists with his words. A new sensation grew in her whole body, as if it was calling for Luffy. "Let me thank you, Luffy," Robin says, as she acts on her female instinct. She begins to drag Luffy towards the room they share now. Luffy was confused to where they were going in such a rush. "Where are we going, Robin?" Luffy asked his girlfriend, his curiosity getting the best of him.
"We're going on the adventure that's more exciting than a 10-course meal," Robin says seductively as she rushes towards their room.
"Really? I thought what was for tonight, Robin," Luffy says in amazement.
"You earned the best damn meat you will ever taste right now," Robin says as she opens the door and throws Luffy in.
She closes the door and makes sure it's locked, and then she pounces on Luffy. She begins to kiss Luffy fiercely. Her hormones have taken hold of her, telling her to take Luffy. Robin's tongue slithers into Luffy's mouth, exploring any spot available, as Luffy's eyes widen in amazement. Soon his hormones kick in, and his instinct taking hold of his senses. He begins to return the passion which Robin has displayed, kiss for kiss, tongue for tongue.
They begin to make their way to their bed, still locked in the passion. Hands sprout out from their bodies, discarding all the clothes until they were both in the nude. Luffy brown orbs begin to scan over Robin's whole body, taking in every naked feature she has to offer.
Robin quickly covers her cleavage and shuts her eyes, realizing that she was exposed. Luffy leans down to give her a kiss, his hand caressing the raven beauty face. "Robin, you are so beautiful. Why you are covering yourself up?" Luffy says in disappointment. This was his first time seeing a woman naked up close, and by the looks of it he was utterly impressed. "Do you mean that? Though you would not be satisfied with my body?" Robin says as she begins to reveal herself to Luffy once more. She watches his eyes for any sudden change in his mood. Luffy gives Robin another kiss in reassurance, his eyes locking onto hers.
"Are you sure you want to do this, Robin?" Luffy says calmly. He loved Robin, so he did not want to pressure her to do anything she did not want to.
"I'm positive, Luffy. Please be gentle to this piece of meat," Robin says with excitement in his voice and eyes. She could not believe that she was about to have sex with her captain. Nervousness and excitement rushed her body at the same time, eager for Luffy to begin. "This bone will never hurt its pirate queen," Luffy says, hunger in his eyes, eager to get started. Luffy was starving for real food. It was lunchtime, but he thought that this meat looked better than anything Sanji has cooked up. Her beautiful blue orbs lock onto his brown orb, questioning each other's motives. As soon as they confirm that both of them want it, they are ready to begin their adventure. The whole Straw Hat crew runs to the deck, expecting an attack from Marines. As they got there, they search around the ship to locate enemies, but there were none. Luffy. The whole crew turns to Luffy's cabin in shock. The floorboards were banging. Were escaping from the room. Luffy and Robin name being yelled out. As they listened more closely, they could hear devil fruit abilities being called. One after another, they began to realize what was going on in that room.
"That lucky shitty bastard is having all the fun," Sanji says in disappointment. He was happy that Luffy and Robin loved each other, but he could not help be jealous that he wasn't the one getting laid.
"This is Supa," Frankie says as he forms the star on his arm. He smiles at the thought that Robin has finally found happiness, even if it's with that idiotic captain. "I think I'll have the if I hear any more of this I'll die disease," Usopp says, covering his ears.
"Well, that's that," Nami simply states. The orange-hair navigator blushes a bit as all the scream and s reach her ear. Nami was overjoyed that her best friend and her Baka captain were making love. It still leaves her in shock, realizing that Luffy has feelings for Robin. It seems like Luffy winning the fight, a smirk growing on Zoro's face. Zoro was not the least bit annoyed because he was proud that the captain has found the person he loved. Hoping that soon he would find that special person for himself.
"Why is Robin crying in pain? I think I should go check on her," Chopper says in confusion. He begins to advance up the stairs towards the room. Luffy must be hurting Robin real bad, he thought to himself. Sanji grabs onto the little reindeer before he could move any further. "As much as I hate to admit it, Chopper, Robin not in pain, she is having pleasure," Sanji says, clenching his teeth down. Sanji began to explain in detail what they were doing to the young boy. Chopper's face expression began to change from happy, sad, confused, and then perverted, followed by his first nosebleed. Sanji turns around, his eyes widen with anger at the image on display. Zoro and Nami were kissing. Zoro had both of his hands on Nami's hips, and Nami had one foot in the air, both hands on Zoro's shoulders. Sanji burst into flames. "You shitty SWORDMAN, let go of my Nami-chan," and he dashes towards Zoro. Before he could do anything, Nami's fist meets his face, and Sanji is sent flying across the deck. Sanji does not make any attempt to recover, instead he lays on the floor, his ass in the air. His face is as pale as a ghost, tears coming from his eyes. "Why is it only I can't find love?" he whispers to himself over and over. Zoro and Nami stop their kissing, a red tint on both of their faces as everyone else look at them in shock. "Prince of Retardia is the only one who can't get a lady," Zoro says in a laughing manner. Sanji burst into flames another time, ready to attack Zoro. In return, Zoro begins to draw his swords, but before any duel can happen there is a loud scream. "Gear second, Jet," Luffy yells with excitement lingering in his voice.
"Luffy, faster, faster," Robin says, repeating that same phrase over and over.
The whole crew begins to get a mental image of Luffy and Robin having sex. Everyone begins to have nosebleeds of their lifetime. Even Nami bleeds, hoping that she will soon experience that with Zoro. Everyone is lying on the floor in their own puddle of blood, no one making a sound or movement. A minute passes by and still silent. 2 minutes pass by and still no movement. 3 minutes pass by and they begin to stir. "Oi, Robin! Oh, Luffy!" The lover screams in unison as they reach their climax together. 5 minutes have passed and the crew began to get on their feet.
They began whipping the blood off their faces, looking at one another in amusement. The door creaks open slowly, steam rushing out from the room.
Everyone looks up to see Luffy's image appear at the entrance of the door. As Luffy become in focus, they are amazed at what they see. Their captain, who is usually energetic and full of adventure, was reduced to a zombie. It looks as if he had just come out of a fierce battle with 3 admirals and barely survived. His spirit and energy drained from his whole body. His eyes were dropping low, wearing purple panties, and his trademark grin missing. "Food, please, food," Luffy says in a voice that no one has ever heard. It seemed like he was on the verge of death.
Before he could step out any further, 2 soft hands grabbed his own, stopping him from advancing. Luffy slowly turns around to see Robin's blue orb staring directly at him. His eyes widen in the realization that her eyes were the same as before. They had a hunger for him. "Where are you going, Luffy? We are not done yet," Robin says with a firm voice as if she was demanding it.
"Was just going to get some food," Luffy says quietly, looking down at the floorboard. "You can get food after. This meat still wants your bone," Robin says seductively. She sprouts more hands and drags Luffy back into the room.
Luffy takes a glance at Sanji, his eyes pleading him to make his food. Slowly the door closes and hot steam and sounds resume the love-making.
Sanji heads straight to the kitchen. The look that Luffy gave him was one he could not shrug off. He felt very envious of his captain and was angry at the moment, but being a chef was his top priority and his captain was in dire need of food. Frankie, Usopp and Chopper began to head down below, feeling a dizzy from their lost blood.
Nami and Zoro look at each other, both eyes were hungry. After everything they had just heard and seen, they could not help but have some jealousy towards Luffy and Robin.
"They're having all the fun," Zoro says, grunting, folding his hands across his chest. "Not if I can help it," Nami says as she grabs Zoro's hand and began to make way to her room.
Before everyone can leave the area, but 2 more screams come from the room.
"Dos fleur pleasure grab," Luffy screams out from the pleasure he just received. "Gomu Gomu no jet snake," Robin lets out a loud cry of pleasure and screaming Luffy's name.
Nami and Zoro began to rush to her room, their excitement leading the way to their lust.
Frankie, Usopp, Chopper did not make it to the workhouse. They collapsed on the floor due to massive blood lost. It was just too many thoughts in one day for them. Sanji lit up a cigarette, biting down on the filter. Cursing to himself as he was smoking, he was pissed off that Luffy and Zoro were the lucky ones on the ship. He had done everything in his power to woo both Robin and Nami, but in the end the rubber bastard and Marimo get the action. He tosses the rest of his cigarette and advances towards the bathroom. He picks up a Playboy magazine and sighs in defeat. If I can't get any girls, at least I can please myself, he says quietly as he closes the door to the bathroom.
A week has passed on the Thousand Sunnies. Everyone on board was eager to find land. It has been nearly 2 weeks since anyone has stepped foot on a hard bedrock surface. The waves and storms of the ocean were not as peaceful as land.
The sky was at its purest blue, seagulls flying around the sky as if they had no cares in the world. The sun shone bright, clouds were scattered among each other, floating with the wind. Such a beautiful day it was to be sailing, but the crew was depressed, scattered across the ship, hoping to be the first to set their eyes on land. At the Lion's Head sat the captain of the crew, DD, in his torn folded blue shorts, his red unbuttoned vest, a straw hat that dangled from his neck, and a beautiful gold bracelet strapped to his arm with the initials NR in it. Robin had given it to him a couple of days ago, telling him it was symbolizing their beautiful relationship. The captain didn't understand, but he decided to wear it anyways. Luffy did not understand much about his relationship with Robin. He knew that he loved her, she loved him. And they made love often, but other than that it was still a mystery to him.
"When are we gonna find land?" he whispers in a sad tone. He loved to be on the sea for adventures, but the lack of attacks from marines and pirates has left him utterly bored.
He has played every game possible with all the crewmates, done everything with Robin, yet the lack of adventures was driving the young captain insane. "I'm sure we will find land soon, Luffy," the raven-haired archaeologist replies in a reassuring voice. She has been watching her boyfriend for quite some time now, studying his body movement and his gestures. It was not like Luffy to ponder about things, but there he was at the helm thinking. Robin was worried for him. Luffy turns around to the sound of her beautiful voice, facing her with a saddened expression. "I hope you're right, I'm going crazy, there's nothing to do, Robin," Luffy says with eyes pouting like a sad dog. He stares at Robin, watching her facial expression change from happy to sad, then to a look of excitement. He notices that she has dressed in a different attire today, wearing a simple purple dress that stretched down to her legs, some purple open-toed sandals, and the bone necklace that Luffy had given her, most likely from all the meat he has eaten, and her signature cowboy hat. Robin, is there something wrong?" Luffy asked curiously, wondering what his girlfriend was thinking about. He never understood how she thought. He knew that she was a million times smarter than him. She had read so many books, and studied so many things. It's amazing that Luffy had never read a book in his life. "I just had an idea, are you up for it, Luffy?" Robin says with a big smile on her face. Her ideas with Luffy were always one thing: sex. Ever since the first time she has had sex with Luffy, she could not get enough of it, always wanting more. She was the one always going to Luffy for sex. Luffy never came up to her once wanting it, but either way she enjoyed it. "What is it this time, Robin?" Luffy questioned, raising an eyebrow in confusion. He did not need to ask, he knew what it was. It was his girlfriend's favorite pastime with him. Although he enjoyed it, he really did not care too much for it. He always thought eating or going on adventures were more fun than being in bed fooling around. "I read in a book that sometimes males like it when female takes control during love making," Robin says, her eyes light up in amusement. "What do you mean?" Luffy questions, not understanding what she fully meant. "Well, I wanted to try, basically you laying in bed and me doing everything. It would pass some time until we find land," Robin says as she stares into his eyes, hoping he would agree. She always knew how to get Luffy to agree to everything she wanted to do, him being simple-minded. She had to take advantage of this because, sometimes when she wanted something he would want other thing. "Okay, Robin, as long as it passed time for land, let's go," Luffy says, his frown replaced with a grin. He grabs her delicate hands, squeezing them together as he rushes her to their room. As they reach their room, Robin quickly closes the door and locks it. Luffy releases her hand, and turns around, a mixture of excitement and confusion on his face. "Take off all your clothes, Luffy, then you lay down," Robin says as she points her finger towards the bed. Little did the captain know, Robin had planned everything out, making sure it would surprise him. Luffy follows her commands and strips butt naked, dropping his clothes to the floor and leaving his straw hat and bracelet on as he lies in the bed. Robin walks toward Luffy, the same look of excitement in her eyes. She kneels down next to his arms and begins to tie his arm up with rope, making sure he would not be able to move. She then works on his legs, doing the same thing, securing him tightly. "What are you doing?" Luffy says, not understand why he has to be tied to the bed. This is so you cannot move during our love session, Luffy. Robin says as she finishes the last knots on the ropes.
She begins to discard her clothing, placing them neatly on the floor. Her cowboy hat sits idly on top of her clothing. Although Luffy did not really care about sex, every time he sees Robin naked it never ceases to amaze him. His eyes widen in excitement as Robin makes her way towards him, the look of hunger replacing her excitement. She begins to put her beautiful plan in motion, which she has dubbed it, the takeover of Luffy. On the deck of the Thousand Sunnies stood the rest of the Straw Hat crew. Earlier Zoro has spotted a silhouette of an island and has yelled the announcement in excitement. The crew wait idly as the island becomes larger and larger, trees begin to appear, an assortment of wild animals come and go. The sight of a barren island appears before them as they dock the ship. Finally we have gotten to an island, Zoro yells in excitement. Sleeping and training on the ship has taken its toll on the swordsman. He was in need of excitement other than Nami, an urge to cut things with his swords burns inside of him. For once the shitty Marimo has something intelligent to say, Sanji scuffles under his voice. Sanji has not been himself lately, due to the fact that his beloved Robin Kwan and Nami-san have been taking from him. He has spent many hours in his bathroom, his sanctuary, relieving his stress. He hopes that by staying on land helps awaken his mood. Can we go now? Usopp and Chopper yell in unison, both extremely excited to venture off to the uncharted island. Hopefully this island is Supa, Frankie yells as he begins to dance. He too is excited to be resting on an island for one day. Yes, everyone can go now, just be back by sundown. Wait, who is gonna tell Luffy and Robin? Nami says, blushing at the sounds emitting from their room. She was envious of Robin and Luffy, always having sex at least 2 times a day. The navigator was lucky if Zoro had sex with her once a week. As she turns to face the crew, stitches grew on her forehead, realizing that everyone has left the ship. No one wanted to disturb the love couple, as they knew the consequences. I guess it my duty, Nami sighs in frustration, not wanting to tell them they have reached land. She begins to walk towards their cabin, her eyes plastered on the door, trying to figure out if they have finished yet. "Aw Robin, it's too much," Luffy screams in a mixture of pleasure and agony. "We not even halfway done yet," Robin replies as she continued to thrash her captain. Nami falls back, a bigger blush growing on her face as she gets a mental image of what the two are doing. "Lucky Oni-sama," the navigator whispers quietly. She quietly gets back onto her feet and heads to her room to write a note. Once she is finished writing her note, she puts it on their door and ventures off onto the island. 2 hours have passed. 2 hours has passed ever since they have reached land and the crew ventured off on their own adventures. In the captain room, the 2 love birds have finally finished their daily routine of love. Luffy was still tied to the bed, panting for air. His face completely drenched in sweat, his eyes bulging out of its sockets, his mouth open wide, breathing in the air. "Next time it's your turn down here," Luffy says as he inhales and exhales rapidly. He has clearly enjoyed Robin's idea, as her idea were always pleasing. He did not know that Robin could wear him down like that. His energy levels were always at its peak, but now it was at its lowest. "Did you like it?" an exhausted Robin says as she gazes at her lover. She has clearly enjoyed the idea of taking control of Luffy. "Yay, it was great, but next time it's your turn," Luffy says as his energy comes back to his body. He begins to lift his arms and legs with all his might, snapping the ropes, breaking himself free. "I will consider that, Luffy," the archaeologist says as she winks at Luffy. She was a little afraid of the idea of Luffy being in control, knowing his energy levels and his idea of sex. They begin to dress into their clothes, putting one garment on at a time until they are fully dressed. Luffy walks towards Robin and plants a soft kiss on her lips, giving thanks for the adventure he had just received. He unlocks the door, and opens it, his widen in amazement as he locks onto solid ground. "Yosh land!" Luffy yells as he jumps up and down in excitement. He begins to advance outside of the room, looking around to find his crew. No one was in sight. A frown grew on his face as he realized they had left him without any word. He turns around, heading back towards Robin, and he finds a note posted on his door. He grabs the note and stares at it with confusion, not understanding what it said. "Robin, come here, we got a note," Luffy says, hoping she could explain everything to him. He walks towards his girlfriend and hands her the note, his eye glistening with questions. Robin glances at the note, realizing it was from Nami. Oni-sama and that baka. We reached land and decided to go explore to see if anything is on the island. We wanted to tell you guys, but it seems that you were having fun with that baka. We have all decided to meet back at the ship at sundown, and don't worry about protecting the ship. Frankie said it would be okay with his new invention. Nami. The beautiful archaeologist giggles as she finished the note. I had plenty of fun, all right, she thought. Well, what did it say? An impatient Luffy says, waiting on Robin to explain. It was from Nami. Basically she said we can explore the island, but we have to be back by sundown and we don't have to worry about guarding the ship. Robin retelling the note her friend had left her. Okay then, let's go, Luffy says as he grabs Robin's arm and jumps off the ship. As his feet touch land, a wide smile appears on the young captain's face. He begins to jump up and down, still attached to Robin's arm. This is exciting. What I wanna do, Robin, Luffy says, his grin still intact, the look of adventure in his eyes. It's up to you, Luffy, I'll follow you, Robin simply stated. She was not as adventurous as her partner. She would rather be reading a book, or relaxing, or her new hobby, exploring love with Luffy. Yosh, time to explore, Luffy yells as he drags Robin along, heading into the forest. He begins to whistle his favorite song he had made up in Sky Island, singing about baka for no apparent reason. Robin giggles at Luffy's song, finding it idiotic yet entertaining at the same time. There were so many trees in this forest, most of them reaching 100 feet tall. Animals begin to run in fear, hiding behind the trees, and the two walk down their path. Minutes pass and they walk, hoping something better appears. As they continue their stroll in the forest, a clearing appears in the forest, and in the middle sat a small river. Luffy's eyes widen in amazement at the sight before him, rushing towards the clearing. Yosh, let's make a camp here for now, I'm hungry, Luffy says as he releases Robin's hand and run into the forest once more. Robin stands idly wondering where Luffy had ran off without a word to. As she thinks, she hears a loud crash in the forest, and sounds of animals squealing. He must be getting lunch, she says to herself, a giggle escaping her pink lips. All the one-on-one time she has been spending with Luffy has been a blessing for her. She has gotten to know him a lot more than anyone else in the crew, and anyone else in her entire life. She was grateful that Luffy had opened up to her, revealing another side of himself that she never knew he had. Her eyes widen at the sight of Luffy carrying a big tree on one shoulder, and two well-sized hogs in the other hand. He grins at Robin, pleased as what he is bringing back. We're going to make a fire and eat some meat, Luffy says as he reaches the archaeologists and set the things down. Sounds like fun, Luffy, Robin says, shooting a smile at her captain. He never ceased to amaze her with his straightforward thinking. He always had a grand plan, which was always exciting. She watched Luffy carefully as he began to break the tree into pieces, creating enough wood for a giant fire. He creates two big squires with the tree trunks, the sole purpose cooking the hogs. He begins to set fire to the wood, making sure it burns properly. As he gazes at it for a minute, he is satisfied with the size and heat it emits. He moves towards the two hogs, stabbing both of them straight off with his invention, and set them on the fire. Where did you learn to do all of this, Luffy? Robin asked in curiosity. She always learned something new from Luffy every day. The sight of him cooking and starting a fire amazed the archaeologists, as she always thought he never knew how to cook a single thing and always relied on Sanji for the meals. Luffy heads towards Robin and lays down next to her, stretching out his legs and arms. When I was a kid, my grandpa always threw me into jungles at night time. He never gave me any food or anything to eat, so I always had to make my own, Luffy says as he begins to grow sweat on his forehead. The memory of his grandpa throwing him into the forest by himself always scares him. I'm sorry to hear that, Luffy, Robin says as a couple of sweat drops form on her face. Ah, don't worry about it, it's time to eat, Luffy says as he grabs both sticks and hands one to Robin. He begins to dig into the hog, leaving no piece of meat left behind. Robin, on the other hand, her eye widen in shock as she looks at the hog. Luffy never takes into consideration and Robin is a woman and does not have the monstrous appetite as he does. She tries to take a bite of the meat, but realizes that she does not have the appetite for a whole hog, she hands it over to Luffy, who gladly accepts. She watches in amazement as he eats both of the hogs, leaving no meat left behind. He burps as a white cloud of smoke comes out of his mouth. His stomach has grown into a balloon. "Oi, that was good," Luffy says, patting his stomach, enjoying the satisfaction of the hogs. He then lays down once again and stares into the sky, watching the clouds move in amazement. Robin rests her head on his shoulders, her hands lay idly on his chest. "The sky is beautiful, isn't it, Robin?" Luffy says, still gazing into the sky. Waiting for a response, but no words come out of her mouth. He adverts his attention to his girlfriend, his eyes soften at the image before him. Robin is in a peaceful sleep. His face was that of an angel, a small smile cemented on her face. A smile formed on his face, soaking in the image before him. Luffy realized that ever since Robin and him were spending so much time together, she has been more happy, more open, revealing a side of her that has been dormant for so long. He is glad that she is happy. He always wants his nakamas happy. If it was for love or adventure, as long as they were happy, he was happy. "You are so beautiful, Robin," Luffy let out in a soft whisper, being extra careful not to wake his sleeping beauty. He begins to lay back, closing his eyes, letting sleep consume him. Little did he know Robin's smile grew bigger as his word reached her ears. A rustled noise comes from the forest as a young man approaches the two sleeping figures. Sanji stops in his tracks as he gazes at Robin and Luffy soaking in their sleeping image. The trip on land has brought him back to his usual self, but he still felt animosity towards his young captain. A thought flashes his mind, and a mischievous grin grew on his face. "That might work," he whispers to himself as he walks back into the forest. The couple laid there in a peaceful slumber, both in each other's warm embrace. The sun began to drop lower and lower from the sky. The star began to appear, their light flicking in the sky. The temperature drops from a warm welcoming air to a bitter cold atmosphere. The young woman began to stir, the cold weather clearly affecting her. She slowly begins to open her eyes, taking in the peaceful sight of Luffy. She adverted her attention towards the sky. The sky had a red glow to it, and although unusual, it was a breathtaking sight. She realized that it was time to head back to the ship. She looks at her lover once more and give him a soft kiss on his cheek. "Wake up, Luffy," Robin says softly, hoping that would be enough to wake the monkey Luffy up. No movement was made from the captain. He was lost in his peaceful slumber. Robin sit there, soaking in the image of her peaceful captain once more. She leans towards his ear and whispers, "Luffy, there's a ton of meat here." Luffy sits up, his eyes shot open, his head turning from side to side. "Nagu," is the only word that comes out of the young boy's mouth. "I see that you are awake now," the raven-haired woman says as she giggles at her captain. She always knew the tricks to wake him up from his slumber, or to get him to do anything. It was not a hard task to convince Luffy. "Where the meat at?" Luffy asked while yawning. "There no meat, it's time to go back to the ship," Robin said softly, standing up from her sitting position and dusting off the backside of her dress. She extends her petite hand to her lover, which he gladly accepts as she lifts him from his position. He begins dusting himself off, and put his straw hat back on his head. Robin, can you lead the way?" Luffy says, knowing that his directional skills are not so great. "Sure thing, Luffy," Robin simply replies. She knew that Luffy had a horrible sense of direction, maybe worse than Zoro, although she did not know how they could get lost so easily. It had always amused her. She takes the lead, as she walks through the forest, being extra careful that she does not step on animals. Her left hand is firmly grasped on Luffy's hand, making sure that he was connected to her somehow. A few minutes have passed as their ship comes into view, the whole crew standing on the deck waiting for the two last members to step aboard. "Finally you two show up," Zoro says, a bit of annoyance in his voice. Ever since Robin and Luffy were together, he notices that everything they did together gave him an eerie feeling. Of course he was happy for Luffy, for they were best friends, but lately his love-making among other things have began to get on the swordsman's nerves. "Hurry up, dinner is ready," Sanji says, as he turns around to walk towards the kitchen. That mischievous grin still intact as he plans out the best way to put his plan in motion. He cared for his captain dearly, but a little payback for having his dreams with his Robin Kwan crushed would be a small price to pay. Everyone begins to make their way towards the kitchen, eager to eat their meals. Of course, once again, an elegant 5-star meal was served by Sanji. Sanji was dancing around Robin and Nami, serving their every request. His normal self has returned. Zoro was drinking his sake, making small talk with Nami about how their day was. Nami was eating her food, bickering at Zoro that he left her alone on the island. Luffy was eating everything in sight. It did not matter if it was his plate or one of his Nakama plate. Food was food. Surprisingly, he did not steal any food from Robin's plate, as he knew that would be disrespectful to his significant other. Robin was eating quietly, her knowing smile casted on her face as she made small talk with everyone from the crew. Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper guarded their food, making sure Luffy could not steal everything, although their plan never works. 20 minutes have passed by as the crew finishes their dinner. They all comment on Sanji's fabulous cooking as they head out of the kitchen. Everyone begins to retire to their quarters, as Sanji heads outside to smoke a cigarette. He watches Luffy and Robin carefully as they head towards their room to start their usual night activities, as Robin calls it. Robin slowly opens the door as she make way into the room, but before Luffy can enter, there is a calling for him. "Oi, Luffy, I saved you a big piece of meat if you want it," Sanji yells, a big grin on his face. "Really?" Luffy yells as his eyes become stars, his mouth begins to water with drool. He turns into the other directions heading towards Sanji, but is soon stopped by a firm hand grasping his arm. He turns around to see Robin staring coldly into his eyes. "Where are you going, Luffy?" Robin asks, already knowing the answer. "I'm gonna go eat some more," Luffy says as he tries to break free from her death hold. "Are you sure?" Robin says, hinting it was his last chance before he was punished for his actions. Luffy begins to think for a minute, realizing that Robin was a little upset at his actions. The calling for meat sounded too appealing for the captain. "Yep, I'll be right back," Luffy says with his grin on his face. Robin slowly releases his arm as he begins to walk towards Sanji. She closes the door, upset that Luffy has chosen meat over her. Sanji laughs, knowing his plan had worked, knowing Luffy would be in deep shit with her tonight. He would feel bad about it later, but for now it would give him joy in seeing his captain and Robin bicker for one night. Luffy began to walk towards Sanji, a big smile on his face, knowing he was gonna get some meat. "Oi, Sanji, where the meat?" Luffy asks excitedly, eager to shove the promised meat in his mouth. "It's over there, it already cooked," Sanji simply replies. Luffy begins his way towards the kitchen, following Sanji directions until he reaches the piece of meat. As he gazes towards the meat, his excitement for it has quickly diminished. The size of the meat was not as promised by Sanji. He quickly grabs the piece of meat and shoves it into his mouth, saddened by the size of it. He turns around planning to say something to Sanji, but to his surprise he is gone. Sighing in defeat, he heads back to his room, reaching to open the door, but surprisingly it was locked. Not realizing what was wrong, he knocks on the door, waiting for an answer. Minutes pass by without a response. Luffy begins to worry, this has never happened to him before. Maybe she didn't hear, he thinks, and he decides to knock again. His hand raises up but touches air as the door opens slowly. Robin stood at the door, a pillow and blanket in hand, tossing it towards Luffy. "What's this for?" Luffy asked in curiosity. Clearly the captain did not know what was going on. He looks into her blue orbs, searching for an answer, but only receives a cold glance. "You're sleeping outside tonight," Robin says with a cold tone in her voice. She knew that Luffy was not bright, and he did not know much about relationship, but Luffy choosing meat over her clearly had its effects on her. "Why?" the young confused captain replies. "For choosing meat over me," Robin firmly says as she shuts the door on Luffy. Luffy stands in front of the door, processing her simple statement, trying to figure out what was wrong about that. Why is she mad at me about that? It was only meat, it's not like it's another girl. Oh, maybe it's because Robin is supposed to be more important than meat. Next time I need to remember Robin is more important, Luffy says, sighing in defeat. He heads towards the crow's nest, knowing that is the warmest place to sleep outside, it being enclosed from the cold, lonely night. Robin releases her devil fruit powers, clearly listening to Luffy's statement, smiling in pleasure at what she heard. "Lesson learned, Luffy," Robin says with a genuine smile on her face. She knew that tonight would be a cold and lonely night for her, being that her lover would not be beside her to give her warmth, but the knowledge that Luffy has learned his lesson was well worth it. Luffy makes his entrance in the crow's nest, throwing a V sign to his first mate. He begins to set his pillow and blanket down on the floor, sitting down on the bench, a frown on his face. She kicked out Zoro says with a smirk on his face. Yay, what are you doing here? Luffy replies, questioning his mate. Same problem, Zoro said. Baka, what did you do? Luffy asks. Sleep, instead of with her, you. Zoro asks. Eat, instead of sleep, Luffy replies. We're both Bakas, they both say in unison as they laugh at their own stupidity. They begin to think about their situation in silence, wondering how they both get punished while one gets so much sex while the other gets none. How the hell do you get in trouble if you and Robin have sex 3 times a day? Zoro questions his captain. I don't know, I told her I was going to be right back. Why are you in trouble for sleeping? Don't you guys have sex a lot? Luffy responds to his first mate, questioning his own stupidity. Well, we don't have sex that much, probably because I rather sleep and train, Zoro sadly says. He knew that it was wrong to disregard Nami's feelings, but he still felt awkward for sleeping in the same bed with his nakama. Using his usual daily routine to bypass the situation was the best idea he could come up with. Baka, I rather eat and go on adventures than have sex, but if it makes Robin happy then I'll do anything for her, Luffy says proudly, knowing that he is at least faring better than his best friend. Zoro is silent for a while, soaking in the information he had just heard, realizing that Nami was important to him as well. He stands up from his position and walks towards the exit. Where are you going? The rubber man asks. To go talk to Nami, Zoro coldly says, not wanting to admit his captain's words had made him realize that he was wrong. Luffy sit for a minute lost in thought, wondering why he felt so alone in the room. He missed the warm body that he had been sleeping next to. Outside was cold and dark, he thought. I am gonna say sorry to Robin, Luffy whispered to himself as he heads to the exit. As both males make their way towards their destinations, they quietly knock on the door, hoping to receive an answer. A minute passes without an answer, both growing less courageous. 2 minutes pass, both turn around to head back to the crow's nest. Before they could walk any further, both doors open simultaneously as a delicate hand reaches for them and pulls them into the room. The door quickly closes behind them. As the minutes pass, happy noises begin to emerge from the rooms. As they reach Sanji's ears, the blonde cook cannot help but smile. I guess true love cannot be broken, the arrow cook whispered to himself before sleep takes over. Luffy's eyes begin to wiggle open as the morning sun is exposed on his body. He glances at his body, it wrapped up in what seems like 100 bandages. He glances around to see everyone is still resting from their previous battle. Luffy seems to be a bit more energetic than he usually is after a battle. I mean, he has just fought a warlord of the Sea Gecko Moria and won. He stands up from his position and looks around, trying to search for that one person that's on his mind. He locates her beneath some rubble, as he jets over there to aid Robin. He quickly lifts the bits and pieces of rubble from her fragile body, making sure everything is off of her. Oi Robin, wake up, Luffy yells as he slaps her face softly. The archaeologists gave no answer to the rubber boy. He began to panic as his lover was not waking up. He began to shake her, slapping her face a little harder, was calling her name even louder than before. He lowers his rubber head just enough to meet her lips, giving her a passionate kiss in order to awake his sleeping beauty. Oi Robin, wake up, don't make me worry like this, Luffy pleads, hoping that she would wake up from his efforts. She began to stir in his arms, making subtle movements as her eyes begin to open slowly. Her beautiful blue orbs take in the image of a worried Luffy staring down at her with sadness in his eyes. Robin grew one of her beautiful smiles that Luffy was only lucky to see. She lifts her hands to meet his face. Luffy, why are you so sad for? Robin weakly makes out as she tries to sit up. Luffy helps her from her lying position, as he sets her back next to a rock. I thought you were dead, can you move? Luffy says with a grin on his face. He was extremely happy she was moving again, showing signs of life. The thought of losing her was too much for the young captain to bear. Since when do you worry about others? Robin says. A bigger smile grew on her face. The young archaeologists knew that Luffy cared immensely for the crew, and she, seeing him in his caring form, brought warmth to the young woman's heart. "Baka, I care about everyone, especially you," he said as he leans down to give her another kiss. He intended for the kiss to be quick, but Robin latched her hands on his head and brought him down for longer than he expected. Robin soon broke the kiss, smiling as Luffy looked down upon her. "I know, I just wanted to hear it," Robin said warmly. She mustered all the strength she had, and stood up leaning on the rock before her. Luffy's smile grew wider as he sees his girlfriend moving, knowing that she is not badly damaged. "Let's go wake the other Robin," Luffy excitedly says as he extends an arm to the archaeologists. She reaches for his hands. As it touches, electricity courses through her body. A yearning for Luffy's love grew in her. She knew she would have to wait until they got back on their ship for that matter. An hour has passed. Everyone was awake and lively as ever, everyone except Zoro. He lay in bed in bandages. He was in the worst condition out of the group. Nami sat quietly beside him, fearing his death was near. Zoro was always the first one to wake up after a battle. To see him lifeless was too much for the navigator to take. "Please wake up, Zoro," Nami whispered under her breath, hoping her words reached her lover. Sanji was outside, talking to the two pirates who say they witnessed what happened between Kuma and Zoro. As they were describing everything to Sanji, Robin could not help but eavesdrop on their conversation, satisfied at what she had heard. She knew she would have to tell Luffy by the end of the day. Keeping him out of the loop was not a choice for her. The crew began to party, and fest on their victorious accomplishment of gaining their shadows back. Everyone gave praises to Luffy for defeating Moria, in which he gladly declined, not wanting to boast about his past victory. As the hours passed, the Strafut crew began to head back to the Thousand Sunny, relieved that they can depart from this spooky island. "Where do I sleep?" came from the new Nakama Luffy had asked to join. A walking skeleton who was a musician was invited to the group by their captain. He felt a bit awkward joining the crew, as no one actually knows him, but was grateful that Luffy had asked, because if he had no place to go. "Just bunk with Sanji for now, tomorrow I'll build up a super room," Frankie says as he gets into his pose. Everyone looks at Frankie with blue streaks behind their heads, still not used to his hentai dance. The crew began to disappear one by one, as the ship began to head into the open sea once more. "If you need me, Brook, I'll be in my room," the captain yelled as he began to make way into his room. Nico Robin followed not too far behind, walking slowly behind Luffy, giving him a slap on his rubber behind. Luffy lets out a small laugh as they enter their room. They close the door as they began to make way towards their bed. "What happened to Zoro? He's never like that," a worried Luffy asks his companion. He knew something horrible had happened to his first mate as he was unconscious, but he could not find the answers. Robin laid quietly, trying to figure out what was the best way to explain what happened. She had an inner conflict, wondering if it was a good idea exposing the knowledge to Luffy, knowing he would only worry more and batter himself over it. "Well, Luffy, while you were asleep something happened to us that we could not prevent," she quietly said. Robin's eyes were glued to his charcoal orbs, monitoring any signs his eyes might show her. Luffy sat quiet, waiting for Robin to explain everything to him before he opened his mouth. "A Shichibukai came to the island, and laid waste to all of us, and he was going to take you back to their headquarters. Then he knocked most of us unconscious, and then Zoro said he would exchange his life for yours," Robin sadly says. Luffy was taken aback by Robin's words. His heart ached at the news that Zoro willingly wanting to exchange his life for his captain's. His eyes filled with anger as the thoughts kept flowing through his head. "Then the Shichibukai took all of your damage and fatigue out of your body with his powers, and Zoro took all of it into his body, thus putting himself in that state," Robin finishes as she removes her eyes from Luffy's and glues it to the floor. She understood the pain that Luffy felt from the news, knowing he cared for Zoro greatly, maybe even more so than her. Luffy sat there quietly. Anger grew from within the depths of his soul. He could not even protect his first mate from almost being murdered. It was taking a toll on the young captain. He stood up and began walking towards the door. His head was low, an aura of sadness enveloped him. "Where are you going, Luffy?" Robin quickly questioned, hoping that he would be fine. She watched as he turned his head, his charcoal orbs meeting his elegant blue orbs, a shimmer of sadness in his eyes. "If I can't protect Zoro, what kind of captain am I?" Luffy whispered, barely enough for her to hear. His hands landed on the doorknob, turning it to open. "It's not your fault, Luffy. Please come back here for a moment," Robin says, a hint of pleading in her voice. She watches as Luffy turns around, his eyes avoiding her gaze as he quietly sits back down on the bed. They sat in a moment of awkward silence. No one was willing to speak. Robin grew nervous at the quietness, not used to Luffy being depressed. "You know it's not your fault, Luffy. Zoro knew what he was doing. He saved your life and our lives," Robin says as her hands begin to caress Luffy's face, wiping tears from his eyes. Luffy was still not willing to speak. His tears began flow more. A frown grew on his face. "Zoro is a strong man. He will get out of this in no time." "I'm really glad you are okay, Luffy. If," Robin says as she grew quiet. Luffy began to look at her in a confused look, wondering what she was gonna say. "If what?" Luffy questions. Robin looked at him with sadness in her eyes, not wanting to finish her sentence. They sat there in silence. Robin was gathering her strength to tell Luffy of her worries. "If you were taken from me or from us, I wouldn't know what I would do if that happened. If you left before me or any of us, I would kill myself to be with you," Robin says as tears began to flow from her beautiful face. Luffy looks at her with a look of bewilderment. A smile grew on his face, knowing that her lover cared for him that much. "That won't happen. I'll never leave you or my nakamas, I promise," Luffy says as he wipes the tears from her face. He leans in to give her another kiss, which calmed her down tremendously. She looks at Luffy, his smile reassuring, his words causing her to grow a smile on her face. "But what if it happens? I won't even have my chance at being your wife or having a wedding," Robin says as she smiles at the thought of being married to Luffy. Luffy looks at her, wondering what she just meant. He had heard those words before from his mentor Shanks, but never got the chance to figure out what it meant. "What do you mean, my wife, a wedding?" Luffy questioned Robin as he scratches his head, showing Robin he was confused. Robin's eyes lit up in amusement as she realizes that Luffy truly did not understand what those words meant. She sat there trying to put together an easy explanation for her lover. "Well, it's when two people say they will be together forever no matter what," Robin said, watching her rubber captain's reactions. He sits quietly, his face distorted as if he was searching his internal databank of knowledge for the meaning. That means all of us are already married then," Luffy says confidently, thinking that he had broken the mystery. Robin let out a small laugh through her pink lips, her eyes giggled in amusement as well. As her laughter began to die down, she focused on Luffy once more. "It's like food, Luffy. You can't imagine eating anything else other than meat. Being married would mean that you and me would be together forever. We could not imagine being with anyone else or doing that special thing we do together in bed with anyone else." Robin clarifies, watching once again for her Luffy's reaction. He sits there, confused, redoing her words into his own terms. "Oh, so basically you mean we agree to spend the rest of our lives together," Luffy says, knowing that this time he had gotten it right. Robin grew a smile on her face as words reached her ear, knowing that Luffy understood what it meant. "Yes, that's exactly what it is, and I want to be married to you," Robin said, a look of joy on her face. Images of Luffy and her and a wedding was bringing warmth to her body. Flutters of joy emerged in her heart. "What are you saying?" he replies as he looks at his happy princess. "I want to be your wife, Luffy. That's if you let me," Robin says as she waits for Luffy's answer. He sits there pondering for a moment, as he thinks the situation over. "Okay, let's get married. You can be my wife," Luffy says. A grin from one ear to his other emerged on his rubber face. Robin sits there, almost jumping for joy at the news. Her eyes began to sparkle, a luminous blue grew in her eyes as tears began to form. Her smile came straight from her heart as she soaked in what he had just said. "Do you really mean it, Luffy?" Robin asks, hoping that he was true to his words. She sits anxiously waiting for an answer. "Yosh, I've decided we are going to get married once we get into the new world," Luffy says as he begins his trademark laugh. He looks at Robin, noticing how happy she has just become. A smile grew on his face as the beautiful image before him. Robin pounces on Luffy, kissing him on his lips, face, cheeks, everywhere that she could put his pink lips. She kisses him for what seems like minutes, as Luffy wraps his arms around the young archaeologists. Robin soon joins him, wrapping her arms around his back, one hand resting firmly on his bottom, giving it a nice squeeze. Her head rested near his neck, her breath sending shivers down his spine. "Good, that means I own you now, Luffy," Robin whispered into his ear as she planted a kiss on it. She rested her head on his neck too, overjoyed by the news that they soon were to be married. Luffy sits there wondering what she meant by owning him, and then it suddenly comes upon the captain. You own me, what am I your slave now?" Luffy exclaims as he releases his arms from the young archaeologists. She lifts her head up, letting out giggles from her beautiful mouth as she gazes into his huge chocolate orbs. "No, I mean, that you are mine now, you can't touch any other women, but you are my slave in bed," Robin happily says as she watches for his reaction. His eyes narrow down as he realizes what she meant. "Oh, see, I knew that already," Luffy says as he puts on a weak laugh. He was still nervous at the word owning, being that he wanted the most freedom in the whole ocean. He knew that if it made Robin happy then everything would be okay, because her happiness brought him extreme pleasure. Luffy stood up and began to walk towards the door, resting his hands on the knob. "Oi Robin, I'll be back, I'm gonna check on Zoro," Luffy say. He stands there patiently waiting for Robin's answer. "Okay, don't be too long, I want something from you," Robin seductively says as she puts on a big smile for her lover. "I wonder what that would be," Luffy jokes as he exits the room. He quietly closes the door, wondering where Zoro might be. He first heads towards Nami's room, knowing that if anyone knew it would be her. He reaches her door and knocks lightly, waiting for an answer. After a minute has passed, the door slowly began to open, revealing a saddened Nami. She motions for Luffy to enter, in which he gladly accepts as he sits on a chair. "What wrong, Nami?" Luffy asks, worried that his navigator was not in the best mood. He watches her move from the door, taking a seat on her bed as she gazes at Luffy. "I'm just so worried for Zoro, I thought he was going to die," Nami says as tears began to form in her eyes. She had grown to love that sword man, even if he had a bad sense of directions, and even if he did not know how to love perfectly yet. He was her sword man who she would never trade for any amount of berry in the world. "He'll be okay, he is as strong as me." "Nami, where is he anyways?" Luffy says, hoping it would bring a little joy to her. She looks at him, a faint smile on her face, knowing that her captain was right. "He's in the crow's nest, he said he wanted to be alone," Nami says as she glances out her window looking for an image of Zoro. She turns her attention once more to Luffy, directly looking into his chocolate eyes. "Say Luffy, do you know what happened to him?" Nami says as she shoots daggers into Luffy's eyes. Luffy sat there quietly thinking if it was right for him to tell her. His inner self wanted to tell her because if it was his nature to be honest, but his heart told him that if Zoro did not say anything to her, it would not be his place to say anything on the matter. "No, I don't, Nami, sorry, I'm gonna go talk to him right now," Luffy says as he breaks the gaze. He walks up to the navigator, giving her one of his strong hugs. She quickly extends her arms, embracing her captain in the hug. This causes her great comfort. He makes his way towards the door, and opens it, but before he leaves he turns around to meet Nami's eyes once more. "Nami, I promise I'll get Zoro down here so he can be with you," Luffy says as he put on his trademark grin. He gives Nami his V sign to Nami as he exits the room. Little to his knowledge, Nami grew a beautiful smile on her face, tears of joy at her captain's words. "Thank you, Luffy, that one of the reason I love you," Nami whispered as she collapsed on her bed. Luffy extends his arms, grabbing the ledge of the crow's nest, his other arm firmly grasping his hat as he blasts off towards the nest. He safely lands on the crow's nest, opening the door, revealing a battered Zoro. He quickly closes the door, and takes a seat on the bench looking at Zoro. Zoro sat quiet, not willing to directly make eye contact with his captain, too afraid that he was not strong enough to protect his or his captain's dreams. Luffy did not know what to say, knowing that he had no power to protect his best friend and first mate hurt him greatly. They both sat in silence, no one making eye contact, no one moving, sitting still as quietly as possible. A hand quietly sprouts from Luffy's shoulders, slapping him in the head, causing him to stir. "Ow!" Luffy yelled as the hand disappeared. Zoro looks at him in confused wondering what had just happened to the captain. A puzzled look grew on the swordman's face as he realizes that nothing was there to cause harm to his captain. Maybe the captain just wanted to start a conversation with him. What did you come for? Zoro said as he looks at his captain in an amused look. Luffy turns his focus to his first mate looking at him with sadness in his eye as he sees his form. How do you feel, Zoro? Luffy quietly says. He scans Zoro's body more carefully, noticing that Zoro had taken a lot of damage. He was bandaged from head to toe. His face was even covered too, his eyes still bloodshot red from his immense bleeding. What are you talking about? I feel fine. Zoro quickly said, no truth in any of his words. He glues his eyes to the floor, making sure Luffy would not see his eyes. He was in immense pain from the damage he took from Luffy's body. Luffy could take a lot of damage and seem unfazed by it. Why are you lying, Zoro? Luffy says with a hint of sadness in his voice. His eyes still glued to his best friend's body, guilt coursing through his body as he realizes that his first mate is in extreme pain. Zoro sits there quietly, not willing to answer, hoping his captain would leave the matter alone. Luffy still watches Zoro, wondering if it would be a good time to talk about it, but realizing it was no or never, he began to take action. Zoro, why did you do it for? Why did you risk your life? Luffy says as tears began to form in his eyes. Zoro's eyes widen as news reaches his ears. He realizes his effort was in vain as his captain knew what he did. I don't know what you're talking about, Zoro quickly replies as his wounds began to ache more. Zoro began to clutch his chest, feeling the immense pain beginning to swell up throughout his chest and body. Luffy notices that Zoro was in immense pain once again, sat there with his head low, ashamed that he could not do anything to comfort him. Robin told me everything. Why did you do something so reckless? Luffy says as he begins to cry from his partner's suffering. Zoro's eyes widen as he realizes that Robin is the one who disclosed the information to Luffy. So it was her who told him. Go figure, Zoro thought. You know I'm going to kill her one day, Zoro says as he grins at the thought of killing Robin. Luffy's eyes widen as he hears Zoro's threat. A grin formed on his face as he realized that his first mate was back to normal. Shishishus, but then you would have to kill me too, Luffy says as he laughs. Zoro begins to join his laughter as they began to form teardrops in their eyes from their joy. Their laughter dies down as they both look each other square in the eye. So why did you do it? Luffy questions his first mate, a smile still on his face. Zoro looks at his captain, feeling at ease knowing that his captain would not say or do anything rash at his reasoning. If I can't protect your dream, how can I fulfill mine? Zoro honestly says to Luffy. Luffy looks at his first mate, a smile grew on his face knowing that Zoro was always a man of honor. If I can't protect your dream, how can I become Pirate King? Luffy honestly says as well, causing both of them to laugh at their own stupidity. They began to slap their legs, laughing while stirring around in pure bliss. Oi, how come you're out here and not with Nami? Luffy asked as his laughter began to die down. He was amazed at Zoro's reaction, realizing maybe that was not a good question for him to ask. Flashback. Zoro, you're awake. How do you feel? A overjoyed Nami yells as she hugs her lover. Zoro winces in pain as he feels her hands surrounding him, but as a man takes the pain until she releases her hold. I'm great, how about you? Zoro responds, hiding any signs of pain from her. Little to his knowledge, Nami could read Zoro like an open book. She knew that he was in pain, but he was too proud to show it. Liar, you're in pain, I can tell. Why do you do such crazy things? Nami yells as tears poured from her eyes. Her fist began fly, landing anything in their path. She was on a reckless frenzy, until Zoro quickly sat up and gave her a quick kiss on her lips. Nami's hands dropped to her sides, in shock that Zoro has taken the step to give her a kiss. He quickly breaks it and lies back on the infirmary bed and smiles. Zoro, what if you died back there? You would have left me and all of us, Nami quietly said as her hands rested on his shoulders. If I died and everyone survived, then I died an honorable death, Zoro said as he rested his hands on top of hers. They sat in silence, both in each other's company, feeling the warmth they were both emitting. Nami lowered her head, giving a passionate kiss to Zoro, making sure she was not too rough. They kissed for a minute until Nami broke it as she gazed into his eyes. Zoro, I realized that today any of us could die at any moment and, Nami said as she locks her soft eyes onto his fierce eyes. Zoro sat there quietly knowing that she was not completely finished with her words, giving her all the time in the world to finish. I'm not willing to lose any of you, especially you because Barry can't bring back my family or you. So that means me and you are gonna get married soon so we can die without any regrets. Nami happily says as she put a great smile on her face. Zoro was taking all the words into his head processing what she just said. As the last words run through his head his eyes widen, marriage is something he had never expected. What? Marry you? Zoro yells as he looks fiercely into her eyes trying to sway her into the other direction. Nami just gives Zoro a warm smile, her eyes brimming with happiness clearly no effect on her by Zoro's anger. Yes, we are getting married and that's that, Nami happily says as she gives Zoro another kiss. Nami intended for the kiss to be passionate and last for minutes, but Zoro quickly broke it and stood up. He marched out of the doctor's office and slammed the door. End of flashback. Zoro winces at his past memory of Nami and him discussing marriage. Luffy sits there with his eyes wide, a smile on his face awaiting an answer from his first mate. Nami asked me to marry her, Zoro quietly said hoping Luffy would not hear his words. Luffy sat there and began to laugh from the depths of his heart, knowing how ironic it was because Robin had asked him to marry him just moments ago. Really? Robin just asked me too, Luffy exclaims. Zoro's eyes widen realizing that Luffy had just been proposed to as well laughing at the matter. Why did she want to marry you Baka? Zoro questions his captain. He found it amusing that both of them were asked to be married on the same day. She said something about being dangerous and I might die, Luffy says laughing at the memory just moments earlier. Zoro smiles as Luffy explains his reason knowing that it was the exact same reason Nami wanted to marry him. Nami wanted to marry me for the same reason, Zoro said as they both began to burst in laughter. Their laughter lasted for minutes, until both of them calmed down wiping their tears of laughter from their face. They both look at each other in amusement a smile plastered on their face. Those two are Bakas don't they know we will never die, they both say in unison as their laughter erupts once again. They began to slap their hands on their knees, their stomach began to curl from their laughter. It would have lasted for minutes, until Luffy began to pick up a scent with his nose. He quickly rose from his sitting position drool began to flow down his gaping mouth. Nagu, he mumbles as he picks up the scent. He walks towards the door inhaling the intoxicating smell through his nose. Oi Luffy what's wrong? A puzzled Zoro asks as he looks at his captain. I need to go do something, oi Zoro go talk to Nami right now, Luffy says heading towards the exit once more. What why? Zoro yells furious at his captain for giving him an order. It's a captain's order now go, Luffy says with a smile on his face. He gives Zoro his V sign before he flies from the crow's nest landing on the deck. I'm gonna kill you one day, Zoro says as he gets up from his seat making way towards the exit. Zoro quickly makes it to Nami's room and knock on the door. Nami quickly opens it and grabs Zoro by his bandages and quickly drags him into the room as she slams the door shut. Luffy's mouth was still watering from the delightful smell of meat. His nose begins to follow the scent, and surprisingly it was coming from his cabin. He quickly opens the door, entering and closing the door. And he hears a click sound symbolizing the door has been locked. He scans the room looking for the meat but to his sadness there was none. His eyes land on his beautiful fiancée. She was only dressed in some very sexy lingerie. Her panties were a dark red color only covering her frontal area, his rear was completely exposed. Her bra was a similar color but it was amazing how it was holding on seeing as there was no straps on it. She laid in an exotic position, causing Luffy to forget about the meat and focus his attention on Robin with his mouth still hung wide open. Luffy, I told you not to make me wait that long, Robin says seductively as she raises a finger motion Luffy to head her way. Luffy obeys as he begins to advance towards his beautiful fiancée. Automatically he began to discard his red vest, his shorts, and his sandals only leaving his red boxers and straw hat in place. I'm sorry didn't know you were gonna do this, Luffy says as he lays down next to her. He looks into her eyes, noticing that the blue in her eyes shone brighter than ever. Oh, But you did, Luffy. I think you need to be taught a lesson. Robin says as she begins to plant kisses on his chest. He begins to whimper at Robin's kisses, his eyes close in the pleasure she was giving him. Robin quickly discards his clothes and carefully sets his hat down, and then she removes her clothes. Luffy looks at her with wide eyes. For some reason she looked extremely beautiful tonight. He wasted no time. He quickly jumped on her, giving her kisses everywhere he knew she liked. Her s grew louder and louder at the affection she was receiving. Meat perfume clearly has an effect on Luffy, she thought. Before they could advance into their sex, a loud scream echoed through the ship. Oi Zoro, faster! A yell which resembled Nami's voice. Luffy lets out a soft laugh as he smiles at the sound. I guess that Baka fixed everything, he whispered, still staring at Robin. He did not understand why, but tonight he was especially attractive to Robin. He yearned for her with passion. You have not fixed our problem yet, Luffy, Robin says as she pulls Luffy into another kiss. The two lovebirds resumed their love session, immense heat emitting from their room. Steam began to emit from their room, as devil fruit name began to emerge from their lips. This was clearly how they made love on a regular occasion, wasting no time using their gifts to their advantage. 20 minutes have passed in their intense love-making when it was suddenly halted. Ow, Luffy, that hurt! Robin yelled as she pushed Luffy away, her hands holding the area he had damaged. Luffy looks at her with puffy eyes, hoping he did not hurt her too bad. Sorry, Robin. I thought I'd try something new. I should have asked you first, Luffy confesses, pleading with Robin to forgive him. Her expression turns from angry to happy, knowing that Luffy wanted to try a new sex move with her. Clearly he enjoyed sex too. Next time you want to try something new, let me know first. That hole is supposed to be broken in slowly, Robin says with a smile on her face. She gives Luffy a kiss for reassurances that she was not angry with him. He looks at her with a small smile, still saddened by her being in pain because of his experiment. It's okay, Luffy. How about we try it again, but this time more slowly first, Robin seductively says as she motions him to get into position. Luffy sits there for a moment, wondering if it would be a good idea for him to begin again, but Robin kept on insisting him it was fine. Really? Okay, I'll do it slower this time, Luffy says as he gave Robin a passionate kiss. They kissed for minutes until he broke it and got into position. He looked into her eyes, gaining confirmation to begin as he resumed his master plan. After 2 hours have passed, the lovebirds both collapsed on their grand bed, both had great smiles plastered on their face. Luffy flung his arms around Robin, hugging her in a warm embrace, making sure one hand was tightly gripping her ass. Robin blushed at the tightness of his hand, returning the favor as she flung a hand and grabbed his rubber ass. Her other hand rested on his shoulder. That was a lot of fun, Luffy exclaimed, happy that he tried his idea with Robin. Before he didn't enjoy sex with Robin as much, but today something about her turned him on greatly. Yes, it was pleasurable. I don't think I can walk with ease tomorrow, Robin says as a chuckle escapes her lips. Luffy's new move surprised her, wondering where he learned it from. Clearly it had caused her pain in the beginning. But if Luffy enjoyed it, then she would learn to enjoy it, which she did. Robin, why did you smell like meat? Luffy asked, realizing that Robin had a seductive smell on her. Robin giggled as he finally realized her secret of the day. Meat perfume. I used it so you would be intoxicated by me. It worked, nay, Robin says as she rests her head on his firm chest. She began to relax, feeling the rise and fall of his toned chest. Yay, I wonder why you were so tasty today. I wanted to eat you up, Luffy says as he strokes Robin raven locks. A smile was on his face, feeling that everything was going perfect between the two. Aren't I always tasty to you, Luffy? Robin says in a playful manner as she plants a soft kiss on his chest, causing a shiver to run down his spine. He returns the kiss, planting one in the crack of her neck, her weak spot. She let out a soft as he continued to kiss her weak spot, knowing it was having an effect on her. Yes, you always taste good, Luffy says as he lifts his head up once more. He rests his rubber head back on the pillow, letting out a small sigh. Luffy, would you care to go another round with our love session? Robin says with a hint of joy in her voice. She was clearly tired from their previous round, but she was just turned on by Luffy at the moment, not getting enough of him. Aren't you tired, Robin? Luffy said as his eyes widened. He was always energetic, but this time after the battle, the lack of meat, and the intense session he just had, he wanted to call it a day. Luffy, don't forget I own you now, Robin says as she sits on top of her lover. She grew a beautiful smile on her face as she moved down to kiss Luffy once again. I'm going to need a big breakfast tomorrow, Luffy says as he returns the kiss his Robin was giving him. Soon their love session resumed, no signs of stopping. That shitty rubber bastard and my elegant beauty are making too much noise, Sanji said to himself as he sits up from his bed. He makes way to his bathroom to relieve the stress that was gathering from below. Lucky I invented these beautiful earplugs, I can sleep soundly, Usopp says as he plugs them in his ears and closes his eyes into the darkness. Lucky I have some fur in my ears to block out the sound, Chopper says as he closes his reindeer eyes. This ship is so alive, I have not heard those sounds for years, I'm so glad to be alive, Brook says as tears flow down his eyeless eyes. He pulls out his violin and plays a beautiful love song. That's it, tomorrow I'm building a super soundproof for that room, Frankie thought to himself as he puts his pillow over his ears. He smiles knowing that his good friend Robin was happy. Zoro, why can't we make love like that, damn it, Nami yells as she looks at Zoro. Zzz came from Zoro as air bubbles came from his nose. Baka, I know you're not sleeping, you're lucky you took a lot of damage or you'd be dead, Nami says as a smile grew on her face. She rested her head on Zoro's chest and began to close her eyes, letting sleep take over her. In the captain's quarters, the two lovebirds have collapsed in their bed after an hour of their second session. They both laid facing each other, so close together their lips brushed against each other. Luffy hands laid on her butt, one swung to her back. Robin did exactly the same as they laid in union. Luffy watched as his fiancée slept so peacefully. I'll always protect you, Robin, Luffy says as he closes his eyes. Before sleep could take over him, a soft kiss was placed on his lips, causing his lips to curl upward. His eyes opened, Chalacate orbs meeting beautiful blue orbs, a smile grew on both of their lips. I know you will, because you are mine now, Robin says as she closes her eyes once more, letting darkness take over, falling sound asleep. Luffy just grins at her, smiling at the words she said. I wouldn't have it any other way, Luffy said as he plants one softer kiss on her lips. He closes his eyes, letting sleep take over him exhausted body. The end. Now we will see you in the next video.